So creating places works fine. The next logical step in our CRUD operations flow is read therefore. And to read data, we should focus on to our get places by user ID and get place by ID constants. Get place by ID would mean that we want to identify a place based on this underscore ID right here, so the place specific ID. Get place by user ID would be this creator ID that we manually entered. Let's first focus on to get place by ID though. Here we can keep our first place ID constant. We'll still need this constant to extract the data from our request. But here, our place constant, this is the one that we have to change here. Here, we don't need the arrow function, so we can just delete this entire code here. Because here, I again want to use our place model now. And as I this time want to find existing places, I won't use save as we did it before with our create place logic. Now I will use another method, which is part of Mongoose, and this is find by ID. And by the way, find by ID is a static method here. This means it's not used on the instance of place, but directly on the place constructor function. Find by ID works a bit different though when comparing it to the save method. In contrast to save, find by ID does not return a promise. And still, then catch or async await would be available. That's Mongoose specific though, but from a conceptual perspective, find by ID doesn't return a promise. In case you need a real promise here, not needed here in our case though, you can still get this if you call exec here after find by ID. With that, you could get a real promise. As I said, for our cases, we don't need that as we can still use async await here due to this Mongoose specific feature of find by ID, but it doesn't return a real promise here. However, we can use find by ID now, and we need one argument though, and that's of course our place ID that we previously defined up here. There is one thing missing though. Do you know what? Well, we again have an asynchronous task right here. As for save, also finding an ID is a task which can take a few moments. Therefore, we will again use our async await syntax right here. So we'll add async here and await right there. And as we also did it for our save method, try catch won't hurt here. So let's also add try right here and put our code into our try code block. And we'll of course also catch the error again as we did it before with our error constant and a new HTTP error. And this could say now something went wrong. Could not find a place. And the error code could be 500 right here. So that's our try catch block. Very important though, also as we did it before, we have to make sure that we really stop our code execution in case we have such an error. Therefore, we return next error. Once again, it's the same logic we actually had with our storing places method previously. We have to change one additional thing though. As you can see, place right here is no longer used, although we use it down here in our if statement. The problem here is our block scoping, so we define our constant here inside our try block. Therefore, we have to define place outside of our try block, and we'll also turn const into let here. So let place, and now inside our block, we get rid of the constant. With that, this code works fine again. One important note though, and I got a typo right here. This should not be wrong. This should be wrong, of course. Now it's fine. So one important note, the error catching right here and right there is a different one. And we have to adjust this if statement, by the way. We'll do that in a few seconds. This error is displayed if our GET request generally has some kind of a problem, if we have missing information, for example. In case the request is fine, but we just don't have our places ID in our database, then this second error down here should be thrown. That's the difference between these two errors. Talking about this if statement, to be in line with our previous logic to catch errors when we worked on our create places code, we can again use the logic we had above. So we can simply create a new constant, which is equal to the new HTTP error here. And the statement is fine. But what we need here is we need to return our next error here to make sure our code execution is stopped in case of this error. With that, the code up here works fine. We just have to tweak our response a bit, because there are actually two things that I would like to change here. The first thing is the fact that the object here we are working with, so our place, is a specific Mongoose object in the end. So we have a lot of special Mongoose methods available for this object. Now, whilst this is fine for creating data and for working with Mongoose, when we get back the response, the object might be easier to use if we just turn it into a normal JavaScript object. That's the first thing I would like to do. The second thing is, you remember this ID we have, this underscore ID. I would also like to get rid of this underscore, because although it's not a big problem in general, it's easier to really have clean properties here. So ID without the underscore, this will also make it easier to refer to this ID later. So these are the two things I want to do right here. First, let's turn our place object into a normal JavaScript object. For this, we simply add the toObject method here to the object. With that, the conversion is done already. And our second goal, to get rid of this underscore, well, this can simply be done by setting getters right here to true. And why is getters true doing this? Well, because Mongoose adds an ID getter to every document which returns the ID as a string. Normally, such getters are lost when we call toObject, but with getters true, we can avoid this and tell Mongoose to add an ID property to the created object. That's it actually. With that, our code should be working fine. Let's save our progress. And let's now go to Postman. Now create a new request, this time a GET request. Again, to localhost 5000 right here, /places, and now the places ID we have right here. So let's enter this ID in the URL. And now let's send this request and see what happens. So this seems to work. We still have our ID up here though with the underscore, but down there we get back the ID without the underscore. With that, we make sure that our getPlaceById logic works fine. And now it's your turn, because down here we have our getPlacesByUserId constant. We also have to adjust this one, and the logic is pretty similar to the one that we had before for our getPlaceById logic. There is one thing you have to know though, you shouldn't use findById here, but the find method. It's a bit more tricky therefore, as you have to make sure that you find a specific property within a place. So basically the ID of the creator. That's the hint I want to give you. So with that, now is your chance to give it a try. And in the next lecture, we'll solve this together.